Welcome to Time Traveling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Paddy.
And I'm Tricia. This week we join the Doctor and Sarah Jane as they get redirected to the planet Kharn and face off, in a manner of speaking, with the Brain of Morbius. We'll be discussing the Doctor, the companions, and the villains, and give your thoughts on the story as a whole.
We would also love to hear your thoughts on this story, so in order to join the discussion, you can check us out at Time Teamp, that's TIMETEAMP, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. As always, I shall lead us in with a rousing rendition of the story recap. Yeah, huzzah! Part 1. On a craggy, windswept planet, an insectoid alien crawls back to its spacecraft, but it is attacked by a large, hook-handed man who kills it. The man, whose name is Kondo, returns to a large castle high in the craggy hills and informs his master of killing the alien. He then presents the severed head of the alien to his master, but he is berated as the master says it will not suit their purposes. Kondo says that humanoids never come to Kharn, the planet that they are on, but his master says that someday one will come and they will be able to complete his work. Meanwhile, the TARDIS lands on the planet and the Doctor storms out of it angrily, shouting into the air about being blown off course. Sarah Jane emerges and asks who he is talking to, and he says the Time Lords, saying that they must have interfered with the TARDIS's controls. She says that the ship could have just malfunctioned, but he insists that the Time Lords are responsible, and he loudly again berates them for calling on him to do their dirty work. He sits down and starts to play with a yo-yo while Sarah Jane takes a look around and finds the insectoid alien ship. Suddenly lightning flashes in the sky, showing a dozen other spaceships of various kinds, all of which are badly damaged. She informs the Doctor, but he refuses to go and investigate with her, so she leaves him behind to go look. A few moments later he hears her startled scream, and he rushes to help her, finding her standing next to the headless corpse of the insectoid alien. He tells her that it was decapitated after the crash. He says that he recognizes the area that they're in via the constellation in the sky, and reveals that they are near his home system. They then spot the castle when the lightning flashes again, and they decide to make their way to it as it is the start of the rain. Unbeknownst to them, they are being watched by a woman in red robes. The woman makes her way back to a cave where other similarly dressed women are in attendance, and she informs an elder of the arrival of the Doctor and Sarah Jane. The elder, whose name is Marin, is amazed as she says that no vessel can approach the planet undetected, but the woman, whose name is Ohika, insists that she is telling the truth. Marin then says that they must protect the elixir of life, a sacred artifact of their sisterhood, and says that Ohika will need to be prepared to take leadership as she is the next oldest. They go to a tabernacle in the wall and open it to reveal a small flame in a bowl. Ohika is shocked by the weakness of the flame, and Marin says that it has been getting slowly weaker. She confides that the only other group to know the existence of the flame are the High Council of the Time Lords, and that she is afraid that they will come to take the elixir by force. Ohika suggests that the Doctor and Sarah Jane could have been sent to steal it, and Marin tells her to summon the rest of the sisterhood. At the castle, the Master is conducting an experiment testing the reflexes on the severed insectoid head when the power goes out. He then calls out for Kondo to fetch some lamps, but goes to find him when he gets no reply. He finds Kondo rummaging through a box, but Kondo says that he was trying to find food. The Master tells him that he knows that he is lying, and he says that he was looking for his amputated arm. He tells Kondo that he will reattach it once they have finished their task, and not before. Suddenly a bell rings, and Kondo goes to answer it, letting the Doctor and Sarah Jane in. The Master, delighted to see actual humans, enthusiastically welcomes them before commenting on the Doctor's head. The Doctor and Sarah Jane joke about his previous incarnation, and the Master tells them to sit by the fire whilst Kondo gets refreshments. The Doctor notices a bust nearby and comments on the Master's, whose name is Madhindari Solan, fascination with heads. Solan hurriedly covers the bust when the Doctor says that it reminds him of someone. The Doctor tells him about the decapitated body in the graveyard of ships in the valley below, and Solan says that they crashed due to the magnetic radiation interference. Kondo returns with the refreshments, but is berated by Solan for not following his training on serving wine. Solan then tells the Doctor and Sarah Jane about how he pulled Kondo from the wreckage of a crashed ship and had to amputate his arm to save him. Meanwhile, the sisterhood starts chanting as Marin stares into an ornate looking glass. The looking glass shows her the TARDIS, and Marin orders the chanting to be increased so they can summon the TARDIS to their temple. The ship appears, and Marin explains its nature to Ohika, who says that its presence confirms that the Time Lords have come to steal the elixir. Ohika says that they cannot use their powers on a Time Lord, but Marin says that there are other ways to beat him, and they start to chant again. Back at the castle, the Doctor reveals that he knows that Solan is a renowned neurosurgeon from Earth's future, and that he was thought to have disappeared after joining a group called the Cult of Morbius. Kondo starts to draw a blade at the mention of the cult, but Solan discreetly signals for him to stop. Suddenly, the wind blows the doors open and blows out the fire before dying down and closing the door again. Solon tells a worried Sarah Jane that it was just a freak wind, but the doctor says that it was actually a telekinetic message from the Sisterhood of Kharn. He notices that the sheet has fallen off the bust again, and he says that it reminds him of the Time Lord Morbius. He then starts to fall unconscious while he explains who Morbius was and passes out as a result of the refreshments being drugged, with Sarah Jane following suit a few moments later. Solon then starts to examine the doctor's head, relishing the surgery to come. He tells Kondo to take Sarah Jane and kill her, but then changes his mind and has Kondo bring the doctor's body to the lab first. However, after they leave, Sarah Jane, having not taken any of the refreshments due to Solon's suspicious behavior, stealthily follows them. In the lab, Solon discovers the doctor is a Time Lord. Kondo warns him to be careful, but Solon, an adherent to Morbius' teachings, says that the Time Lords are weak, but before he can begin to operate, he says they need to first get the repair to generators. After they go, though, the doctor's body disappears just like the TARDIS did. A few moments later, Sarah Jane enters and starts to look for the doctor. She spots a four-poster bed nearby with the curtains closed and makes her way to it. However, she recoils in horror as a headless body constructed of several different dismembered parts and wires rises up to meet her. Part 2. Sarah Jane moves away from the body, but then takes cover when she hears Solon and Kondo returning. They enter the lab to find the doctor's body gone, and Solon notices the curtains of the bed disturbed. He angrily asks Kondo if he drugged the refreshments as instructed, and Kondo confirms that he did. Solon realizes that the Sisterhood must have used their powers to teleport the doctor to their sanctuary. He vows revenge against them all, and tells Kondo that they need to retrieve the doctor's body, no matter the risk. After they leave, Sarah Jane exits the lab. At the sanctuary, the doctor comes to and is interrogated by Marin and Ohika, who demand to know if he was sent by the Time Lords. A confused doctor says that he doesn't know and is taken aback when Marin says that he will be executed for his crimes. The doctor again says that he doesn't know what they're talking about and says that his last memory was being at Solon's castle with him and Morbius. Ohika and Marin say that Morbius was executed by the Time Lords for his crimes, and the doctor says that he felt Morbius' presence when he looked at the bust in the castle. He says that even though his body was destroyed, his will endured and that his essence is still alive. Marin says that he is dead due to the fact that she was present at his execution and tells the doctor he will soon join him. Meanwhile, Solon and Kondo arrive outside the sanctuary, where Solon says they will have to wait for the right time to rescue the doctor. Kondo says that he can hear something and begins to look around. Unbeknownst to them, they are being observed by Sarah Jane, who accidentally stood on a loose rock but stopped it from falling on the ledge that she is on. Kondo and Solon again take cover when they see a group of sisters bringing bundles of wood into the sanctuary. Inside, Marin offers to give the doctor a powder to help reduce the pain of his execution in exchange for his confession of guilt, which he says will prevent the Time Lords from seeking vengeance. The doctor says that the Time Lords are allies to the Sisterhood, but Marin retorts that they were only allies out of mutual fear of Morbius. Ohika informs him that the elixir of life is dying, and that they believe the Time Lords sent him to retrieve what little remains. The doctor is shocked to hear this, as he says the elixir is maintained by gases from the planet's core, which should allow it to burn for millions of years. He asks if there is any recent seismic activity, but Ohika says it is time for the execution and he is tied to a pyre. The doctor asks to be allowed to help them, as he says if the gases are blocked from release, then there could be a catastrophic explosion. Suddenly, Solon and Kondo burst in after having heard the sacrificial chant from outside. Marin orders them to be executed over their interference, and blasts Kondo with an energy bolt from her ring when he tries to protect Solon. Solon begs forgiveness and asks to be allowed to take the doctor with him, as repayment for all the medical aid that he has given the Sisterhood over the years. Marin refuses, and Solon offers Kondo in his place, but when the offer is also refused, he asks that they keep the doctor's head intact so he can have it. As Marin and Solon argue, Sarah Jane, wearing a ceremonial robe, sneaks in and frees the doctor from the pyre. Solon leaves dejected with Kondo, and the execution begins as the pyre is lit. The sisters are caught up in the revelry of the ceremony, and the doctor jumps from the pyre and goes to escape with Sarah Jane. Marin fires an energy bolt at them but misses. However, the flash from the bolt's impact stuns Sarah Jane, and the doctor leads her away as she's been temporarily blinded. Once they reach the safety of the wastes, the doctor examines Sarah Jane's eyes and says that her optic nerves have most likely been numbed by the energy bolt, and her vision should return in a few hours. Sarah Jane becomes slightly manic over the potential permanent damage, but the doctor says that they need to go back to Solon's. She tells him about the body she found, but he says that Solon is keeping something much worse there. Back at the castle, Kondo confronts Solon over his attempt to sacrifice him and prepares to kill him. Solon begs for mercy and offers to reattach Kondo's missing arm. Kondo agrees, and Solon tells him to go to the lab to prepare whilst he fetches the arm. Solon then goes to a private room in the lower section of the castle and communes with Morbius and tells the renegade Time Lord that he needs more time to fulfill their plan. Morbius impatiently tells him that he always asks for more time, but Solon says it has all been for the good, as he tells him about all the amazing scientific discoveries he has made. Morbius ignores him and says that he might as well be dead rather than spend any more time in his current state. Their argument is interrupted by Kondo, who calls to inform Solon of the arrival of the Doctor and Sarah Jane. The Doctor asks Solon to examine Sarah Jane's eyes, and Solon says that they will need to go to the lab. As Solon carries out the examination, the Doctor looks around the lab and spots the headless body. After a lengthy examination, Solon quietly indicates to the Doctor that the damage is irreparable, but tells Sarah Jane that she will get a full recovery. Solon tells Kondo to take her back to the parlour, but she's reluctant to leave the Doctor alone. He tells her that he will be alright, and once she is gone, he discusses her situation with Solon. He tells the Doctor that the only thing that can help her is the regenerative properties of the elixir of life, and the Doctor says that he will go to the sanctuary to retrieve it. Solon wishes him luck, but once he is gone, he calls Kondo and gives him a message to take to Marin ahead of the Doctor's arrival. On her own, Sarah Jane hears Morbius's calls for Solon and follows the sound of his voice to the private room. When she gets there, Morbius assumes that she has been sent by the Sisterhood to kill him. Due to her blindness, Sarah Jane is unable to see that Morbius's dissembled voice is coming from a brain in a jar. Part 3. Solon appears and angrily removes Sarah Jane from the room, saying that no one is allowed to be in there. She then overhears Solon inform Morbius about his plan to take the Doctor's head to house his brain. Morbius angrily tells him to stop delaying, but Solon says that they can't risk damaging the head. Morbius says that he doesn't care about how he will appear and only wants to be able to move again and reclaim the power that he once had. Solon tells him about the trap that he has sent the Doctor into, but as they are talking, Sarah Jane closes the door and locks it from the outside before making her way back upstairs and out of the castle. At the sanctuary, Ohika and a group of neophyte sisters drink the elixir of life as part of a ceremony. Once the sisters leave, Marin tells Ohika that the last of the elixir is gone and that they will be the only members of the Sisterhood to remain immortal. Ohika says that Marin should have taken it as well, but she ignores her. They are then interrupted when Solon's message is delivered, and Marin is intrigued by the Doctor's actions, so she orders Ohika to prepare the guards. A short while later, the Doctor arrives at the sanctuary and is captured. He is brought to Marin and says that he came for the elixir in order to help Sarah Jane. Marin then reveals that Solon lied about the permanent damage and says that Sarah Jane's sight will soon return. The Doctor then tries to leave, but Marin says that he is still to be executed. The Doctor says that he didn't come at the behest of the Time Lords and instead has arrived by accident, but he says that he can't leave until he finds out what Solon is doing. Ohika says that they are aware of everything that happens on the planet, but the Doctor suggests that Morbius is using his own mental abilities to block their powers. Marin again insists that Morbius was executed and his body was completely atomized. She recounts Morbius's original quest for power when he gathered an army and brought them to Kharn to gain the elixir of life, only to be beaten by combined power of the Sisterhood and the Time Lords. Meanwhile, out in the wastes, Sarah Jane attempts to find her way through the rocky terrain, but she is eventually captured by Kondo, who released Solon when he got back to the castle and was then sent to find her and kill her. However, he doesn't kill her due to finding her pretty, and instead brings her back to the castle despite her protest to let her go so she can rescue the Doctor. Back at the sanctuary, the Doctor offers to try and find a way to restore the flame of the elixir of life, but Marin is reluctant as no one bar the Sisterhood can look at it. Ohika says that there is no harm in letting him try to restore it, and he is brought to the tabernacle. They see the flame is even lower than before, but the Doctor is more fascinated by the natural way in how the gases interact with the flame to produce the elixir. He says that it would be easy to mass-produce it, but it would be a terrible situation due to the near-limitless immortality it would provide to the universe. Marin mocks him, saying that the Time Lords had no objection to taking it, but she retorts that they only use it to help jumpstart regenerations and not use it as frequently as the sisters do. The Doctor takes something from behind his ear and throws it into the tabernacle, which causes the flame to vanish. Thinking he has betrayed them, Marin orders him to be executed, but a few moments later, the flame roars back into life. The Doctor reveals that the soot from the rock around the tabernacle had choked the flame. However, Marin refuses to release him, but instead knocks him out and sends him back to Solon on a stretcher. Back at the castle, Solon straps Sarah Jane down onto the table in the laboratory, but Kondo tells him not to hurt her. Solon is amused by Kondo's affections for her and then tells him to leave. Sarah Jane then says that he is insane, but Solon angrily states that no one appreciates the breakthroughs that he has made and then proudly shows off the body he assembled for Morbius. He then notices how late it is and that there has been no word from Marin. He then makes his way to his private chamber and informs Morbius about the delay in receiving the Doctor's head, revealing that he is also a Time Lord. Morbius rebukes him by saying that he must have been sent by the Time Lords to find him so they can come and destroy him. He says they need to leave as soon as possible, but Solon says his containment unit can't be moved. Morbius says that he can just use Sarah Jane's head, but again, Morbius says that her skull is too small for his brain. Morbius then recalls that Solon once suggested using an artificial case to house his brain and says that they can use that. Solon says it is not viable for a long-term solution, as it would not be able to handle the buildup of static electricity created by his brain. Morbius says that they have no other choice, and Solon reluctantly agrees. He calls Kondo to help him move Morbius's brain to the lab, and once there, Solon tells Kondo to fetch the body. However, Kondo notices that the left arm of the body is his own missing one, and he angrily confronts Solon about it. He throws Solon to the ground, and Solon takes out a gun and shoots him. Kondo continues to attack him, and in their struggle, they knock Morbius's brain to the floor. Solon angrily shoots Kondo several more times before he runs off. In a frantic state, Solon places the brain into the artificial case and then unties Sarah Jane so that she can help him with the operation. She tries to resist, but he says that he will kill her unless she follows his instructions. He tells her to pump an electric current through his body whilst he attaches the brain case to the body. He tests the reflexes on the body and sees that there is a positive reaction, and he ecstatically declares that the operation is a success. He then hears the doorbell and goes to answer it. He arrives to find the doctor's body on the stretcher. Back in the lab, Sarah Jane tries to find her way out of the lab, but doesn't notice Morbius rise out of his bed and approach her. Part 4. Sarah Jane's vision comes back, and she screams as she sees Morbius about to attack her. She manages to avoid him and flees from the lab as he pursues her. Morbius staggers into a table and accidentally catches fire when he knocks over a Bunsen burner. Sarah Jane runs upstairs and spots Solon and tells him about Morbius. Solon then rushes to check on him, and Sarah Jane goes to leave, but then spots the doctor's body on the stretcher. However, her concern for him is short-lived when he wakes up and says they need to find Morbius's brain, but she tells him that it is too late. Meanwhile, Morbius manages to put out the flames on his body, but then catches sight of himself in a mirror and angrily breaks it. Solon arrives and tells him to keep calm, saying that his speech center is not working. He tries to get Morbius to recognize him, but the disorientated Time Lord squeezes him into unconsciousness before staggering out of the lab. He encounters the Doctor and Sarah Jane as they are making their way to the lab. The Doctor tries to talk to him, but Morbius clubs him to the ground with his right arm, which is a large pincer claw. He then goes to attack Sarah Jane, but Kondo appears and attempts to defend her. Unfortunately, he accidentally knocks her through a doorway, causing her to tumble down a flight of stairs. Kondo does his best to overcome Morbius, but he is too weak from his wounds, and Morbius snaps his neck. Morbius then leaves the castle, and the Doctor gets up and goes to help Sarah Jane. He brings her into the room and lets her rest on a table whilst he goes back to the main hall. Solon appears carrying a tranquilizer gun and says he needs to stop Morbius, telling the Doctor that he is most likely on his way to the sanctuary, as his hatred for the sisters is probably what is directing him. Out in the waste, Morbius encounters one of the sisters and kills her. A short while later, the Doctor and Solon find her body and search the area for any sign of Morbius. They split up and the Doctor is ambushed by the deranged Time Lord, but he is rescued by Solon, who knocks it out with a tranquilizer gun. Solon says that he can make Morbius better, but the Doctor tells Solon that they will remove the brain so that it can be sent to the Time Lords. Meanwhile, the body of the sister is brought back to the sanctuary, and Ohika tells a horrified Marin that the Doctor was telling the truth. Marin is still reluctant to believe that Morbius is still alive, but Ohika says that they must face the truth and help the Doctor stop him. Marin says that she is too weak to lead them into battle, but Ohika says that she will do it. Marin warns her that away from the sanctuary their powers will be diminished, but Ohika says that they can still try to help. Back at the castle, the Doctor instructs Solon to detach the brain whilst he goes to check on Sarah Jane. She wakes up from her rest and initially thinks everything that occurred has been a dream, but the Doctor says that it really did happen. He tells her how dangerous Morbius is as they head back to the lab, but they discover that Solon has locked them in. Sarah Jane says to use the sonic screwdriver, but he says that he left it in the TARDIS. He then recognizes the structure of the room as being reminiscent of a hydrogen plant and says that it should be built to the same specifications as other ones. He tells Sarah Jane to look around for hydrogen cyanide whilst he locates an air duct in the wall. He says the duct should lead into Solon's lab and they will make cyanogen gas to send through the duct. The gas starts to pour into Solon's lab just as he finishes operating on Morbius. He dies from the lethal gas, but Morbius is unaffected and gets off the operating table and leaves the lab. He makes his way to the room where the Doctor and Sarah Jane are and reveals that he survived due to the lungs of his body being of an alien origin. Morbius says that once his resurrection is known, his followers will return, and not even the combined might of the Time Lords and the Sisterhood will be able to stop him. The Doctor then challenges him to a mind-bending contest, informing Sarah Jane that it is the sort of mental battle Time Lords do for sport, but it can be lethal. Morbius agrees, and the Doctor uses equipment from the room to make an ad hoc frame containing 2 headsets. The 2 Time Lords put on their headsets and begin their battle, causing a series of images to appear on a screen in the frame. The images show Morbius as he was before his execution, as well as nearly a dozen of the Doctor's previous incarnations. The machine suddenly overloads and Morbius staggers from the room whilst the Doctor collapses to the ground, and Sarah Jane tries to rouse him with smelling salts. As Morbius enters the main hall, he is suddenly attacked by a group of the sisters, who chase him from the castle into the wastes. They corner him on a cliff top and force him over the edge, watching as he plummets to his death. Meanwhile, Ohika finds Sarah Jane, who says that she thinks the Doctor is dead. They bring him back to the sanctuary, where Marin says that enough elixir has been created by the reignited flame to help save him. Ohika says that Marin needs it as well, but Marin says the Doctor's need is greater. The Doctor is instantly revived by the elixir, and he watches with Sarah Jane and the sisters as Marin walks into the flame. They see her change into a young woman before disappearing completely. Ohika thanks the Doctor for his assistance, and he says that he and Sarah Jane need to leave. He gives Ohika some miniature flashbangs to use in the event that the soot clogs the flame again. He then uses one as the TARDIS leaves, making it look like it has exploded. End of the story. So, now that is the story recapped, we're going to go, as always, to the trivia spot. So, what have you got for us this week?
So, this week, The Brain of Morbius air date was the 3rd of January to the 24th of January 1976. The writer of the story is a man by the name of Robert Bland. Robert Bland isn't a real person. Robert Bland.
I would hope not, because that's a horrible last name to have.
I'm sure there's someone out there whose last name actually is Bland and they're highly offended.
I was sorry, but I just case like, are you Bland? I can't help it.
So this is actually a pseudonym for Terrance Dicks and Robert Holmes. Terrance was one who originally wrote the story that was handed over to Bob Holmes, and Bob did a number of modifications on it, which Terrance wasn't happy with. In Terrance's version, Morbius's assistant was a robot, and he felt that the change in species kind of removed the nuance of being unable to perceive beauty, and so just constructing a body from whatever worked best. Which I can kind of get where he's coming from. Like, why does Solon pick random body parts? If you're someone who doesn't perceive beauty in the same way that humans do, it makes more sense you go with what is the strongest features that you can give the new body. Apparently the rewrites themselves came from a budgetary need. They had to rewrite it because of the budget. But Terrance didn't like the way it ended up, and so he asked for his name not to be on it, and he asked to be credited under some Bland pseudonym.
For fuck's sake.
So Bob Holmes, apparently somewhat passive-aggressively, went with Robin Bland, which Terrance found quite amusing. He did later say that he detested the changes that Bob made to the script, although he understood that was the only way to get the show made. He wasn't a big fan of it. The director of the story is Christopher Barry. This is story number 9 of 10 for Christopher. So we previously saw his work in The Daleks, The Rescue, The Romans, The Savages, The Power of the Daleks, The Demons, The Mutants, and Robot. And we'll see his work one more time in The Creature from the Pit. Now, we mentioned budgetary reasons requiring rewrites. It also had a bit of an impact on the Sisterhood. So they only hired one professional dancer to be part of the Sisterhood. And then all of the other actresses or people who had dance experience, I don't know if they used that professional dancer all that much, because all the dancing I saw was spinning around in a circle.
Yeah, and it's like everyone seems to be like on par in skill level for that.
So I don't know if maybe they had intended to have the dances be more elaborate, and then they ended up just continually paring it down. According to Cynthia Granville, who played Marin, Tom Baker nearly got set on fire. So if you imagine you've got the Doctor tied to the stake, basically, and they actually set fire to the wood. It was meant to be heavily fireproofed. Like everything was checked out and whatever. But apparently the flames shot up in massive columns instead of creeping up around him the way it was meant to. And according to her, if she hadn't broken character and yelled at Tom to get the fuck off the pyre, he could have caught fire and been seriously injured. And they had to get the fire brigade in between takes in order to get the whole situation under control. Fire indoors. Always dangerous.
That's pretty fucking scary, like.
Yeah, like if you think about these days, you do fire with special effects or whatever. But like they literally had a fire being built and it nearly killed the doctor. And you know, the universe, and I'm sure Tom thanks Cynthia for breaking character.
that reminds you of a story. The actor Oliver Reed did a movie, The Devils it's called, and in it he gets like burnt at the stake. But I think for his thing was they actually had to install a trap door because they wanted to make it look as realistic as possible. So rather than have him like jump off or whatever, they just had a trap door that when the camera cut, he just fucking went underneath the pyre. But I think he did get singed.
Like managing flames in a studio is always incredibly difficult. You know, no matter what you're trying to do, it's always very challenging. For this very reason, you can do all the preparation in the world, and it can still get out of hand. So, what did you think of one of the few times, not the only time, I think we've seen it once or twice before, but the use of blood when Kondo gets shot?
It is thematically, it is very apt. That being said, it's kind of jarring.
Yeah, Christopher Barry said that he regretted it. He thought that it was a bit much. You know, yes, Kondo shot at point blank range, but on Doctor Who, they often wouldn't show blood. You would have had him like grab his stomach or whatever. You maybe would have shown a little bit of blood on his hands, but like the fact that they actually had like the squib with the blood on his shirt and everything else.
Yeah,
he thought it went a little bit too far, and he kind of regretted it.
I can imagine that this had Mrs. Mary Whitehouse really, really up in arms.
I imagine so. I imagine there's probably a lot of this. I imagine she probably had issues with the sisterhood as well. You mentioned that the TARDIS dematerializes after the Doctor releases another like flashbang thing.
Yeah.
We don't actually see him do that. He just disappears, and then the TARDIS disappears with a flash instead of with its normal gradual dematerialization.
Yeah.
They played the dematerialization sound really, really fast to sort of get it to line up. I always thought it was an interesting thing because we don't see him dropping the flashbang before he goes inside. And obviously there wouldn't have been enough time for it to be dropped before he went inside, so I don't fully get it, but whatever. Interesting choice. So this story, depending on how you feel about Chris Chibnall, this story is either the best thing ever or the worst thing ever in terms of it opens up a plot hole, idea, topic around there being incarnations of the Doctor before William Hartnell.
Yeah.
So during the mental battle between the Doctor and Morbius, we see on screen that Morbius's face, I think they show like 2 of his faces.
No,
well, they show
what the bust would have looked like as an actual person.
Yeah, so they show the head in a jar, and then they show the bust. So 2 heads basically. Whereas for the Doctor, it goes Tom to John, and then he clearly has the upper hand, so Morbius's face comes on screen. And then it goes back to Tom, John, Patrick, Bill, other people.
Yeah.
The other people are George Galecchio, who was a production unit manager, Bob Holmes, Graham Harper, who was a production assistant, Dougie Camfield, Philip Hinchcliffe, Christopher Barry, and Robert Stewart Banks. Oh, also a guy named Christopher Baker. So they were all members of the production staff. Their pictures were used for that. Some of them were dressed up in sort of
in funny hats,
slightly silly costumes.
Yeah.
But the whole idea, according to Philip, is that his original intention was that it was meant to be previous incarnations of the Doctor. That was Philip's intention for that scene. I know, like, before Chris Chibnall came along, like you and I talked about this before, there was a lot of online discussion of, no, those were actually the previous faces of Morbius. But if they had been the previous faces of Morbius, it would have started with the jar, the bust, and then the others. But, you know, according to Philip, like, fans at the time chose to ignore what he was setting up. They still sort of, you know, connected with the 13 incarnations bit that later came up in the series. And as far as he's concerned, he doesn't care what fans say. Whatever they think it is, to him, those are past incarnations, and therefore he played the Doctor. That's Philip's thing. A couple of people, before we go into our cast, a couple of alternative casting options that were being spit around. For so long, Christopher Barry was trying to get some, like, horror film icons. Apparently he was considering trying to get Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Vincent Price, as well as John Bennett and Freddie Jones. I think Solon as, like, Christopher Lee would be really interesting. Peter Cushing, I think, would be hard to see because he'd obviously done the Doctor Who movies, so I think that would be a little bit weird. But, like, Christopher Lee in that role, I think, would have been really, really interesting. Vincent Price, I haven't seen too much of, so I can't really comment.
Vincent Price would have been, like, I love Vincent Price, but I think that would have been a bit too hammy, I think. Personally, because I've seen Vincent Price do, like, and I love his work with Roger Corman for the Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. Like, they're fantastic. But I think there's like a stereotype to Vincent Price's performance. Freddie Jones, I would have been very interested to see what it would be like with Freddie Jones.
Yeah. Some other alternative casting options or considerations for Kondo. There was Stephen Thorne, Michael Kilgariff, who did the Robot in Robot, and Bernard Bresslaw. And then, do you have a comment on one of those?
No, because again, I really like Bernard Bresslaw, so I think it would have been very interesting to see him in that role.
And then for Marin, we have alternative considerations for Mary Mars, Sheila Burrell, and Eileen Way. I don't think I've seen any of their work.
I don't think I've seen them either. Now, their names don't ring like a bell.
Yeah. So on to our cast proper, though. So the cast that was actually hired. So as the voice of Morbius, we have Michael Spice. So this is role 1 of 2 for Michael in Doctor Who. We'll see him again as Magnus Greel in The Talons of Right Trian. His non-Who credits include Hamlet, The Marriage Lines, Edward II, The Tragedy of Richard II, very Shakespearean, The Pallisers, Zedcars, Blake 7, and Number 10. Michael passed away in 1983. As Solon, we ended up having Philip Maddock. This is appearance 3 of 4 for Philip. We previously saw him in The Crotons and also in The War Games, where he played the Warlord, which didn't register in my brain until I read it. I was like, holy shit, it is him. We'll see him again in The Power of Krull.
I'm wondering, isn't it technically appearance 4 out of 5 because he was in the second Doctor Who movie?
Yeah, I wasn't including that. It was on TV appearance.
Okay, fair enough.
Marin, as I mentioned previously, is Cynthia Grenville. According to Cynthia, it was actually Elizabeth Sladen who recommended her for the role of Marin because she actually was able to play older than she actually was. So there wasn't that much of a difference between Cynthia and the actress who played Ohika. But Cynthia looked older than she was, so Elizabeth Sladen recommended her. This is Cynthia's only Doctor Who credit. Her non-Who credits include Ivanhoe, Within These Walls, Secrets, The Gift, Poldark, and The Citadel. Cynthia passed away last year in November of 2021. Kondo ended up being played by Colin Fay, who is an opera singer, which you wouldn't imagine when you look at Kondo, but hey.
No.
Acting. This is his only Doctor Who acting credit. His non-Who credits include All Creatures Great and Small, The Enigma Files, Don't Wait Up, and The Bill. Lastly, as a Hohika, we have Gilly Brown. This is her only Doctor Who acting credit. Her non-Who credits include The Newcomers, Anne of Five Towns, Colditz, Z-Cars, The Mayor of Casterbridge, Jackanory, Playhouse, and Grange Hill. I will say for anyone who watched a much future story that mentions the Sisterhood of Kharn, Ohika does not come back. So the character we see in the Stephen Moffat story that has the Sisterhood is a character called Ohila, not Ohika. I'm sure when we eventually get to talking about that story, we may find out more about why Moffat made that choice. But there we go.
And before we move on, a couple of weeks ago, I was back at my parents' place and I was watching an episode of Dead's Army and Philip Maddock was in it. So I took a picture of him and sent it on to Trish going, I knew I recognised those teeth. Oh. So we come to the character discussion component of the podcast. Thank you very much for the trivia.
You're very welcome.
So, as always, we will be discussing the Doctor, the companion of Sarah Jane, prominent characters of Marin, Ohika, and I've put down Kondo. You can feel free to disagree with me. And then we have the villains of Solon and Morbius.
Indeed.
So, it's been a while. I can't remember which of us went first.
Nope.
So
My apologies to our listeners who listen every week that we disappeared off the map for 3 weeks. I was very busy.
Yes. But I've seen some very reassuring notices, so we're all okay. Thank you, guys. So I'll give you a bit of a break. I'll go first.
Off we go.
Cool. I like the Doctor here. I really do. It's like it starts out funny, which is odd given like the overall tone of this story. You know, he comes out and he's just like giving out shit about the Time Lords, and he just sits down, he starts playing with his yo-yo. But what I like about that is, as the story kicks in, he doesn't let his own feelings towards the Time Lord High Council like cloud his judgment. You know, to like you've been sent here by the Time Lords to steal the elixir, and the Time Lords only want the elixir, and they never say no to using it. He's like, well, no, that's not true. As Time Lords, we only use it in these instances. So I like how it's not quite towing the party line, but it's like you get the impression that if he had any bit of belief in that statement, he would acknowledge it. So I like that. I thought it was a kind of very interesting dynamic to have. I love his relationship with Sarah Jane here. It's great. The banter between the two of them was great as always. I love the emotions we see on his face when like Solon gives like the silent there's no hope thing, you know? Like it's like the whole thing of he feels responsible for what happened to her. And you know he's willing to risk his life to go get the elixir from her, or from Marin and the Sisterhood. One interesting thing though, okay? Did the Doctor pretty much murder Solon in this, or do you think it was accidental?
I think it was accidental because if you think about it, when he releases the cyanide or the cyanogen, whatever you want to call it, Sarah asks like, "So how long is this going to take?" Or like, when will we know if it works? And he says, if we're still locked in a month from now, it didn't work. I loved the little back and forth they have around that scene. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
So I think his thing was he would release the cyanogen and Solon would come down and unlock the door. to get it to stop. I don't think he anticipated Solon working through it
Mm.
and dying. I don't think that was. I think because like, his thing was that this was to get them out of the room.
Yeah,
There's no point in killing the two people in the building, and
capable
if you're
of.
still locked in a room.
Yeah.
So I think it was accidental,
Mm.
personally.
Yeah, because this is one part of my head was like there is an element of like putting a mad dog down with
Mm.
Solon, but I don't think that was the driving force here, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I think with the way they phrased it, I don't think that's what it was intended to be.
Hmm. Yeah, but like, no, sorry, I just was thinking about like any other thoughts that I had. No, overall, like I enjoyed this particular story. I thought
Mm.
or the Doctor in this particular story. I don't see any real major faults with him. Like,
Me neither.
yeah,
I really liked him in this one too. Um, I do like the fact that we get to see his frustration with the Time Lords.
mm,
Like it's a very real and very honest frustration. While, like you said, at the same time, he won't throw them under a bus.
mm-hmm,
He won't admit that they're doing shit that they're not. And he does stand up for Time Lord civilization in that respect. Also, it doesn't prevent him from seeing a Time Lord criminal stopped. You know,
mm-hmm,
Morbius was a bad Time Lord. He was sentenced by the Time Lords, and the Doctor is perfectly willing to uphold that sentence. Just because the Time Lords bother him doesn't mean that he would unleash a mad Time Lord, or doesn't mean that he wouldn't uphold their sentence of him.
mm,
Which I like. There was none of this sort of like, well, he's the Time Lord's problem. What do I care? There was none of that. There was no shirking of responsibility purely because he was pissed off at the Time Lords, which I like. Um, the thing that I love about, and you mentioned it there, that like the way Tom acts with the whole Sarah being blind thing,
mm,
I think is brilliant. Um, it's like it's a really great way to see how he cares about her. It's a nice sort of continuation from last week. With the facial, or I say last 3 weeks ago, um, when he realized that it wasn't Sarah Jane, it was a robot.
mm-hmm,
It was a nice continuation of that. And what I really love is the fact that like he doesn't trust Solon. He is fully convinced he knows what Solon is doing, but he still knows that Solon is Sarah's best chance, and he needs to go to Solon to get his opinion.
mm-hmm,
Even though he doesn't trust Solon, he still goes to the Sisterhood who wanted to kill him in the somewhat vain hope that Solon isn't lying. Like, Solon wants his head. He knows that. The Sisterhood wants him dead. He knows that as well. But he's still not willing to gamble not going. If there's a chance, it could bring Sarah's eyesight back. Which I love. Is his commitment to her, even though he knows he's likely walking into a trap. Even though he knows Solon could be lying. There is the smallest fractional chance that he's not. And so the Doctor has to take it. The only part of this story that I'm not the biggest fan of when it comes to the Doctor
mm,
is sort of how he belittles the Sisterhood.
mm,
He's not very respectful of how they perceive the flame, their connection to it, their dependence on it. I get the fact that like he was sort of saying, look, you've become so dependent on it, you've become stagnant. But at the same time, I don't know, he just sort of he's not as respectful of their beliefs as I thought he would be.
I don't know if you picked up on it the same way that I did, right? But
Mm.
watching it this time around, there's a huge reminiscence of the last alliance of men and elves against Sauron.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, isn't there? Like you get this
Yeah.
feeling. Oh, yeah. So like I would say in this instance, the Doctor would represent the elves,
Yeah.
because yeah, and like their viewpoints of men.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that like it's not overly cruel, so I don't mind it too much. But the one blippy negative
Yeah,
in the
like
whole thing.
it is a bit like, well, you could, like, you could make the argument that it's just, oh, bravado. At the
Mm.
same time, it's like there is a smell of, oh, how quaint, it's like,
Yeah, and you're like
yeah.
a little bit of a respect, like if nothing else, Kharn, the Sisterhoods of Kharn, and the Time Lords have always had, or have had for many centuries, this friendly relationship.
Mm,
Don't be a dick, like.
yeah.
you
Sorry,
know?
we'll take that argument from someone that can actually pilot their TARDIS. Thank you very much.
Yeah, like I'm sure a Time Lord has explained to them before how the elixir is formed. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter how it's formed, it matters what it means to them, and I think he could have done it being a bit more respectful.
Mm.
I need to talk a little bit about the sort of pre-Hartnell doctors or the alternative doctors of Philip Hinchcliffe and the boys. Right?
Mhm. Yeah.
When I first watched it, I did initially think it was Solon's, or it was Morbius's
Morbius.
previous forms.
Same here.
The very first time I watched it, 12 years ago.
Mm.
I know in subsequent rewatches, I know you and I discussed it way before Chibnall came along,
Mm-hmm.
of are they previous incarnations of the Doctor? And it never massively bothered me if that's what they were meant to be.
Mm.
Do you know? My only issue with it tying into the Timeless Child, if we're to jump ahead for a second, is the fact that I would have thought that the Timeless Child was, or like that, say, Roots Doctor or whatever, would have been 2.5.
Yeah, that's
Because there's a TARDIS that looks like a police box. That's
like,
my only criticism of that.
Aye.
Because of this story, I fully accept the Timeless Child storyline because the story set the precedent
Mm-hmm.
back in the 70s, and that was maybe not the Timeless Child, but that was its intention, was to be, hey, maybe there was lives before Hartnell.
Mm.
So just wanted to call it out because I know a lot of people sort of, they either accept or ignore the Brain of Morbius in the Timeless Child conversation. I accept it.
It's it's an episode. It's an episode that raises much discussion. Yes, that's the way we will coin it until we actually discuss it ourselves.
Well, yeah. But as I said, a lot of people sort of, they either accept or ignore the Brain of Morbius in connection with that.
Mm.
Having watched it again with the future story in mind, I don't mind it. When the Timeless Child was announced, I didn't mind it because the Brain of Morbius set it up. So I'm like,
yeah,
no. And even on its own, it just raises interesting questions.
Yeah.
You know?
What were the personalities of these other 8 geezers like? Oh, Christ. Shall we move on?
We shall indeed, to our companion of Sarah Jane.
Yes, or also known as Eliza Doolittle.
You had messaged me that you'd kind of forgotten that part.
Yeah. Yeah. So when Sarah Jane is toying with the potential of her future being blind, she kind of goes all Victorian street urchin, going, "I presume I could be selling some flowers, governor," and all this, and he pulls like a shawl over her head, and it's just like, okay. Now, I think I don't find, while that reaction is very funny, I still don't find it kind of out of place. Like, I think
No.
I think it's kind of suitable.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this story is an interesting one for Sarah Jane as a character. Because on the one hand, we have some really quick thinking. Like when she notices the Doctor passing out, it's like, fuck it, I'll just pretend to pass out as well.
Yeah. But even before even before that, she like tips the wine into the, and it's like,
so there's some really quick thinking on her part, really observant and stuff. Some great bravery, and like she rescues him from, like, she dances and bows in front of Marin like everyone else, even though she's not dressed like them at all.
Yeah.
That takes fucking guts.
The easiest "Where's Wally" in the world.
Yeah, and then we also have her playfulness, which I've always wondered how much of that was Liz and how much of that was in the script. Because, she sort of like blows a raspberry at him and kicks her leg up and then swans off to look at, to explore the planet when he's being petulant or whatever.
Yeah.
So for me, the whole selling some flowers and all that kind of stuff, it sort of just ties in with Sarah becoming, and this is something that we'll talk about, I'm sure, when we get to the end of Sarah Jane's run on the classic show, is how Sarah Jane changes the character from the Time Warrior to now.
Yeah.
She's always been funny and witty, but it's coming out in a different playfulness now. So for me, I would say it's not completely out of character for her to suddenly start channeling Eliza Doolittle when she thinks she's blind. The flip side of it, though, and I gotta say as well, she has some amazing fucking guts to go wandering around in the mountains while blind. That's insane. She could very easily just fall to her death. And I would also encourage her to cling to the rock. Don't just wander off in the middle. That's the point. But where I think I'm a little bit conflicted with her character in this is that all of that's true. But once she rescues the Doctor from the Sisterhood, she doesn't really contribute a whole lot anymore. She gets blinded. She's very brave. But she doesn't really drive anything after that.
The only kind of, in terms of driving the story, she's the one that kind of reveals Morbius to the audience.
Yeah, but she also did that before she went blind. Because she saw him.
No. She saw the body.
But as in we already know what Morbius looks like because she saw him already. She just didn't see him with the brain head on, but we saw the brain head when Solon was putting his head on. So I don't know. It's
I mean the brain in the jar, in the actual brain in the disembodied brain.
Oh yeah. But I don't know. I just think there was moments, particularly in episodes 3 and 4, where she was just sort of there. She had great moments with Tom. Like I said, the whole I had this crazy dream that this happened. I was like, that did fucking happen, didn't it? Or how long would it take us to get out of here? Oh, if we're still here in a month. It didn't work. Okay, cool. There's still some great banter and great back and forth. I was thinking in the last half, she's just sort of there.
Yeah, no, I as I said, outside of them, the introductory, showing the audience what Morbius looks like in his actual, what the will of Morbius looks like as such. She does kind of fall into if we're going to Hammer horror style, which this is very Hammer horror.
Yeah, oh yeah.
She kind of falls into the damsel in distress role. Now, while not necessarily still being 100% that, she is relegated to that stereotype as such, with a lot more agency, I would say.
Yeah, that's again my only criticism is that particularly in episode 4, she doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
Which isn't normal for Sarah. Usually Sarah's driving something. So that was probably my only criticism for how about you? Anything that we didn't touch on?
No, I think you've kind of pretty much touched on everything. As I said, I love her little you clever little cookie moment when she's like, okay, this guy's pretty fucking shady, and his
wine is green.
Yeah, well, that's not the weird part, but just the very casually tipping it to the side. I'm like, no, I never actually noticed that the first time I watched it.
No, did you not?
No, never picked up on that the first time.
I picked that straight away when I first watched it.
So I was like, yeah, they're fucking clever. But the bravery, and just trying to go into the wastes while she was blind. Like
Mm.
I thought like that's really really cool. I really enjoyed that section of it because that just highlights who Sarah Jane is. You know, no matter you'd have to take her legs, and even then, you want to make sure that the door isn't locked. You know.
It's a very interesting way of putting it.
Yeah. But no, I don't think I'd have too much else to say. Like I do agree that she kind of falls into the background as the story goes on, because then we go into like the actual crescendo of the whole story.
Yeah.
But when she's there, she's good. Yeah,
I agree.
She actively does nothing to have a detractor in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Cool.
So should we go on to our prominent characters?
Yes. Marin, Ohika, and Kondo, or Mock. Which way do you want to do it? No, I know that maybe Kondo last because
Was it Kondo last?
Kondo last. Would you do Ohika and then Marin, or Marin and Ohika?
I don't mind. Sure.
I think maybe Marin first, because I think it's true Marin that we see the status quo in the sisterhood at the moment. And it's very, I suppose it's an isolationist viewpoint to have, that kind of reminiscent of the guys in Voga. You know, the outside world, if they are out to get us type thing, or they only want us for this one particular thing. And Marin kind of like, because of the situation and the stress of the flames going out, supposedly Morbius stayed alive, and now you have a Time Lord here. It's like, I think she just can't see the past the Occam's razor of the whole thing, where this is the easiest answer to everything that's going on. I'm going to stick with it. And like it does get it, you actually do end up getting very frustrated with her.
Yeah, I think like with Marin, she sort of reminds me in some ways of like the Jedi Council in the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy.
The original trilogy, what? Dead?
No, in the prequel trilogy, because like Marin sort of, her fear of what could happen led to isolation and stagnation. And it led to her, she had a particular judgment and a belief that Morbius was gone. And the idea that Morbius could have still been alive in some capacity on the planet and hiding himself from her, she doesn't even want to entertain the notion, which is very similar to...
The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very similar to that. Like, Marin is so afraid of losing the elixir and like what that would mean for the sisterhood, that like she cuts her people off from the outside universe. She kills random fucking people who are just passing by by pulling their ships out of the sky. And in all that, she's missing opportunities to gain knowledge and also support. So, like I said when we were talking about the Doctor, that I'm pretty sure the Time Lord explained to them before where the elixir came from, because he fucking explains it to them here, and he already knew that. Do you know what I mean? He knew where it came from. This is common knowledge where the flame comes from. But she could have gained extra support had she not been so isolationist. Had she not been so afraid of the flame dying, or so afraid of people coming to get the elixir. She could have reached out to the Time Lords for help when it looked like there was a problem with it. But she was so afraid of what they would do, she went completely the other direction. I was like, no, fuck it. We're not having anything more to do with them. And this leads her to making rash judgments, refusing to listen to any idea that doesn't match that judgment. And yet you do get incredibly frustrated with her when you're like, dude, like, he clearly appeared out of nowhere. He didn't even come to you first. Like, why the fuck do you think he's there to steal the elixir? He didn't even know that you're running out of it. He knows nothing about the situation. With all that, though, in many ways, she is still a good leader, though. When you consider the fact that they have the elixir of life, and the doctor says that, like, Maren was old when the elixir was discovered. She's been an old lady for forever.
Yeah.
Do you know? But she also knows that the sisterhood must come before her own needs. Like, were she, any other leader of a cult or whatever, it would be she gets the elixir first. It's all about her having the elixir and prolonging her life. She's not about that.
No.
Like, she freely admits to Ohika that the reason why she doesn't want them to go chase down Morbius is because she can't leave anymore. She can't lead them. But she's willing to hand over to Ohika. When she's giving out everyone, like, the last few drops of the elixir, she doesn't take any for herself. She recognizes that she is not the future of the sisterhood. She'll hold on as long as she can, but she is not its future. That's going to be Ohika. And as the story progresses, she sort of realizes more and more that her time has come to an end.
Yeah.
Now, given the way the flame is set up, I've never fully understood. Is it like, a sacred fire, sacred flame, weird hand motion that she sort of, like, changed herself into mist to become part of the flame? Because she didn't fucking crawl up into it, like.
No.
So they never quite explain how she becomes one with the flame. But the idea that she would do that final sacrifice of herself for the future of the sisterhood, it does show that she's a good leader. She just was lost in her fear and in her own paranoia.
Yeah.
In many ways, like the Jedi High Council of old.
So we have Doctor Who, Lord of the Rings, Hammer Horror, Star Wars. I wonder what else we can get into this.
Yeah, like, I think, I think it's very easy to sort of condemn Maren in a way. And like I said, it's very easy to get frustrated with the bitch. Like,
yeah.
Seriously.
But no, like, as you said, like, there is the element of, like, she wants the sisterhood to survive. Like, she isn't the sisterhood. Put it that way.
Which, like I said, had this been on any other show, it would have been about her hoarding it and stuff like that. Which she didn't do here. How about you? Anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think pretty much we've covered all the bases there on her.
So when we go on to Ohika, Paddy, what are your thoughts?
I liked Ohika, because as the story goes on, like, you see that she's the more, I won't say rational, reasonable of the two, because she's willing to entertain, like, the Doctor's story. She's willing to entertain these various different, like, well, what if he survived? What if Morbius did survive? And what if the Doctor is telling the truth? Like, we can explore these things. We don't have to be, like, a one-track thing. So, like, I think she would, like, Maren picked well when she picked her to be the next leader. So, like, the sisterhood, for however big it is or its reaches, I think it's in good hands because of Ohika in this story.
I'd agree. I think the one thing about Ohika is that, like, she is very fearful at the start of the story, and she does follow Maren and she agrees with Maren, but when presented with alternative evidence, she's not opposed to it, which is good. I think, like Maren, she's very much willing to do what is needed to save the sisterhood.
Yeah.
Though obviously that's sort of counterbalanced with this connection she has with Maren. So where Maren is offering up the elixir to everyone else, Ohika's like, what about you? Like, we're not a sisterhood without you. Like, I don't get it. And like, she's obviously very connected to her. Maybe in a sort of parental kind of way or something like that she looks up to Maren in a great deal. So it's like, while she accepts Marin's choices, you could tell that's hurting her to know that Marin won't survive it. There won't be enough elixir formed in time to keep Marin alive. And so she's sort of balancing that out with doing what she believes and doing what she needs to do in order to keep the sisterhood as a whole alive. But I always thought that was kind of sweet that, like, she's not trying to bump Marin off. She's not a blind follower. But she still holds great respect for Marin and great love for her.
Yeah.
And you can tell that she's conflicted on the fact that Marin won't think of herself. You know, which I think it's very, very sweet. I think it's something that's quite rare to see often in these types of stories. Usually you'd have, you know, the junior member wanting to bump off the elder, or coveting the elixir for herself, and I could do it better. But there's a lot of love and respect between the two, which I think is great.
No, like as you say, to bring another thing into this, it kind of reminds you of Picard and Riker a bit.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
And then we have Kondo.
I'll ask you to give me your impression of Kondo first, and I'll give you mine.
So, I have to wonder, when Solon was, you know, doing the operation to save Kondo's life after he saved him from the crash, like, to what extent was, like, how bad were his injuries? Because did he, like, try and heal his, like, say, if he had brain damage, did he try and repair it? Or did he possibly induce some sort of brain damage to make him, like, subservient? And because, like, we have no idea, like, we don't know anything about Kondo's race, so we don't know, like, is he actually as mentally deficient as he comes across in the story, or did Solon do something to him or not do something to him to make him like this?
I have never once considered the fact that Kondo may have been more intelligent before the story and Solon did something or could have done something. I have never once considered that. I don't think it's true, but I had never considered it.
Well, because no, like, again, like you, I wouldn't have considered it. But, like, so I watched this story a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Then obviously we had our bit of a break, and I hadn't done my character notes at that stage. So I was like, okay, like, I can do my character notes when we decide to actually do it. So as a result, I watched it last night. And then it kind of struck me in the sense of, for someone that was able to pilot a spaceship, now I know, like, you could say, like, the Ogrons. Ogrons are a bit fucking dim as well. But, like, what did Solon, like, essentially create a servitor? You know, someone
I think you're
the heavy
making an
lifting.
assumption there that isn't present in the story.
Yeah, like,
which is that Kondo flew the ship.
Yeah, possibly. Like, yeah, because he said he saved him from the wreckage of a certain spacecraft, but not necessarily that he was.
There's only just, like, there could have been 3,000 other people on that ship.
Yeah.
So I think you're making a slight assumption there that isn't. I think it's an interesting idea. Like I said, it's not one I considered because I don't think there's anything in the story that twigged that in my head.
Because, like, Kondo has. See, like, I was there going, like, oh, like, if that's the case, then Kondo definitely falls into the Scarment category of villains, in that, you know, he's the sympathetic villain, you know, because he dies horribly. But if he is just, like, the manservant, essentially, then he does fall into the villain category as opposed to a prominent character.
Yeah, when we were talking, you said that your Kondo's prominent character, and I was like, okay, like, he tries to do good at the end, you know, but I saw Kondo as a victim of Solon's treatment, definitely, 100%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does that change the fact that he will do anything asked of him to get his arm back?
Mm-hmm. No.
And he's not very intelligent. He's very easily led. Does that excuse his own vicious behavior? I don't think so. Do you know, like, yes, Solon does, tell him to poison the thing or whatever, but like, Kondo doesn't shy away from any of that. He never says no. He never. The only thing he doesn't want to do is die himself. Die himself, get his arm back. Those are the two.
Yeah.
Like that. That's it. Like, do you know what I mean? So like, he never says no. He never, asks to be freed. The only thing he wants is his hand back. And again, I kind of got the impression that if he did have his hand back, he'd still work for Solon. Like,
yeah.
He's not opposed to what Solon is doing.
I would be interested to read the novelization of this.
I believe I might have it.
Cool. In that case, if you do, I might might borrow it off you. Like, his rebellion at the end is more so to save Sarah Jane, pretty Sarah Jane, than
which I have comments about that.
Yeah, well, and that's like, I think that was like, and again, depending on this fucking backstory now that I have in my head, that if he is someone that was manufactured to be like this, his rebellion to save Sarah Jane, it's a more noble thing, so he goes into prominent character. However, if it's like two beasts, like if it's the beast fighting over the pretty girl, then it's like, well, he's still a villain who's just doing a good thing,
And that's the way I see him. So you're saying that he rebelled over. He didn't rebel over Sarah Jane. He rebelled because he found out Solon had sewed his arm onto the new Morbius body. That's why he rebelled.
Yeah.
What he did do at the end was, when he heard Sarah screaming, he fought the Morbius body.
Yeah.
That's it. He didn't rebel against Solon because of Sarah at any point.
I think I just I've actually kind of like, I like the idea of Solon doing something to him.
So I kind of do as well, because, it's an interesting idea. But like I said, in my opinion, anyway, there's nothing in the story that
indicates to
supports any of that.
Yeah, yeah.
His girl pretty type thing is probably meant to be endearing, in the same way it was with Tommy in Planet of the Spiders. Or in the same way it was kind of meant to be with the robot in Robot. Yeah. However, it comes across as incredibly fucking creepy.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it was meant to be endearing, it kind of fails at being endearing.
It's probably meant to be. It's probably meant to be the gentle giant, and like, don't judge Frankenstein's monster. Like, is Solon or is Kondo also a Frankenstein monster in the same way that Morbius is? I get that could be what they're going for, but like, to the point I was making there with you, he wants her, but he doesn't do anything to protect her or to save her until the very end when he's dying. That's it. Like, he bodily lifts her up and takes her back to Solon, even though she's crying her eyes out saying, I would want to be your friend if you let me go, and he won't. Do you know? The fact that he's stroking her hair and touching her face while she can't see and while she's unconscious. I don't know if they were going for the gentle giant thing, but they massively missed the mark. If that's what they're going for. I mean, yeah, it's great for Sarah Jane at the very end. He rushes in to save her from Morbius. That's great. Would have been even better if he hadn't carried her back there in the first place.
Yeah. No, I think my little headcanon kind of forced him into the prominent character section, where he is a villain, but he's the lesser villain.
Yeah, he's a henchman.
Yeah.
Do you know? But he's not a henchman who he doesn't criticize what he's being asked to do. Like, he was perfectly willing to lop the doctor's head off the minute he dropped unconscious. Do you know? And you kind of get the sense that, like, if Solon did say, like, oh, we'll use the girl's head, Kondo would be sad. He'd probably still do it, though.
Hmm.
Do you know? Like, if he'd found her unconscious somewhere.
Actually, speaking of heads and that kind of stuff, I completely skipped over the fact of I think I didn't like about the Doctor in this story.
Mm.
We see a Solonian. It's the first creature that Morbius kills. And the humans in the mutants call them mutts. The Doctor calls the alien a mutt. I didn't like that.
Yeah. With a different Doctor, so different. Also, like, it sort of came across as a weird term of endearment when he said it, because he said, like, poor mutt.
Yeah.
Do you know? Like, yeah. I didn't like it either.
Yeah, I just think, like, we saw, especially, like, what that story was meant to represent. Like, him saying that is like, nah, doesn't sit right. Doesn't sit right.
But yeah, so, like, I would see Kondo as a henchman. Not necessarily a villain outright, because, like, he wasn't doing villainous acts of his own accord, bar being creepy.
Yeah.
With Sarah Jane. But he never says no. And then we have our villains proper, or our remaining villains, depending on how you want to look at it, of Morbius and Solon. So shall we do Solon first and build up to Morbius? Or do you think that Solon is actually the bigger villain of the piece?
I think Solon is the bigger villain, because in a story titled The Brain of Morbius, it doesn't really impact. Like, when I was watching this, I was saying, this seems kind of reminiscent of the Pyramids of Mars. But Sutek was directly influencing stuff in Pyramids. Like, his power was actively, like, marionetting Scarman. Or, you know, his mental abilities were like stopping the explosion, or even like when he hypnotized the Doctor. Like, Morbius is he's essentially just a brain in a jar. Like, he doesn't have any amazing, like, his mental powers are a throwaway line that the Doctor said that maybe his mental abilities are blocking your second sight or whatever it is. And I think it's the idea of Morbius is the villain. Like, yeah, so like we've seen renegade Time Lords before in different capacities. Like, we've seen the meddling monk, we've seen the war chief, and we saw obviously the master. The idea of a Time Lord with a massive cult army, I think that's genuinely intriguing. I actually really like that, to the extent of, like, the Time Lords have to create an alliance to stop him. That is awesome. And, like, I really like the fact that this story is set after the fact. Like, it's set, like, this is, as I said, it's the Lord of the Rings side of things. This is like the third age. I really want to see what it was like at its height, like what Morbius was like when he was leading, like, or when he was gathering his army and gathering his cult. So Morbius himself doesn't really influence a lot of stuff, but it's more so the idea of Morbius.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's a very interesting premise for a villain. He's a brain in a jar and vocal cords on a pole. But I think what's interesting is that, like, even though a lot of his lines are throwaway, he does still have so much power. Like, everything Solon is doing, and we'll talk about Solon in a second, is for Solon's own benefit, but it's in the name
of Morbius.
Do you know? Morbius, even just as a brain in a jar and a set of vocal cords, is inspiring action. Which is powerful in its own right.
Yeah.
Do you know? I quite like the fact that Morbius doesn't give a monkey's bollocks what his body's going to look like. he's like, I just want a body. I don't like being a brain in a jar. I'm terrified that Barbara Wright is going to come along and smash me with a hammer or something. But what we do see, and what is true from particularly the Master and the War Chief and some of the other Time Lords we've seen, like Second Doctor onwards, not necessarily true of the Meddling Monk, but kind of true of Second Doctor onwards, is the arrogance.
Yeah.
The arrogance of the Time Lords is still present. It's ultimately what's his undoing, is that arrogance. You know? So I think he's a very interesting villain. I also would be interested in seeing the sort of the cult of Morbius,
Yeah.
like as a standalone episode or even as a film. I think it would be really interesting because, like, you sort of describe it as like they form an alliance between the Time Lords and Sisters of Kharn. I sort of picked it up that, like, yeah, they have an alliance, but sort of like the Time Lords were coming to their rescue, in a way. Do you know? But I think that would be, I think it'd be a really good story. I think it'd be a really good film.
Because like if you think like to, I suppose, like, to do a visualization of it, it'd be like, you know, in Avengers Endgame, all the various different like species that Thanos has in his army. That's how I envision Morbius's cult, you know.
Yeah. I think that'd be really interesting. Though if they were ever to do that, I would infinitely prefer either a film or miniseries. I wouldn't actually, unless they were going to do it like Flux, I wouldn't actually like it to be done in New Who. Like if they were going to retcon that, like one of the Doctor's previous selves was there or whatever, I wouldn't want them to do it in the like 45-minute format. It needs to be a multi.
I'd nearly even go like a Big Finish series. I think
that's a visual, you see. Big Finish is awesome, but I need a visual.
Yeah. Well, like, you get the right cast and you get the right sound.
Well, true, but I still want to see it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
The important part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in this story, I think Morbius does have an effect. But he is the monster in the story.
Yeah.
Do you know? And unlike, you know, some of the tellings of Frankenstein, where it's like, oh, like, you know, don't judge the monster by the creator. Here, the monster and the creator are very, very similar.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Just to speak of like the monster part of Morbius, that fight scene with Kondo was just done perfectly.
That was brilliant.
It was so well done. Like, Christopher Barry's direction is just amazing for the story.
Yeah. And then we have Solon.
Jesus Christ, Philip Maddock is amazing in this story.
He is so good. He is so brilliant.
So good here.
While I think it would be interesting to see a Christopher Lee type or Peter Cushing type in this role, I almost wouldn't want it as a replacement for what we have. What we have is great.
Yeah.
I think they would have been an interesting choice. I don't necessarily believe they would have been a better choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, it, like, sometimes, like, you see a name attached to something, it's like, oh, it's star, you know, like a big leading star, it's going to be brilliant. You see a different version of it with a lesser known star, it's even better, you know?
Yeah.
Like, just like I was like, which do I prefer? Do I prefer his performance as the Warlord, or do I prefer his performance as Solon? Because I actually listened back to our conversation about the Warlord in War Games, and like we were blown away by him there. So like, it's just like he's so fucking good here. Like he's incredibly charismatic, and he's able to change his emotions like at the flip of a switch. Like, you know, when he's ranting and raving to Kondo about the sisters, you know, like, you know, that, you know, that vile harpy, I'll see her, you know, ground to dust or whatever. And then he goes in, he's like, Marin, I beg of you, I have given you aid in the past. And he's like very, like, kind of humble, and yeah, it's so good. And as he goes on, like, he's getting caught up in his own little cult of personality, you know.
I did have one moment in this where, and I've had this multiple times watching this, when he's going around shouting for Condor because he needs like more candles. All I hear in my head is Aziz, light.
Thank you, Aziz.
Completely unrelated, but something that always comes to my mind.
No, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
He's such a master manipulator here. Like how he manipulates Kondo, how he manipulates the Doctor, how he doesn't quite get there with Sarah Jane, because Sarah Jane kind of like susses him out a bit. Like you're a bit too obsessed with heads. You're kind of creepy. Yeah. Also, I think there's like, whether it's intentional or unintentional, I think there's a bit of manipulation of Morbius as well.
Kind of. I think Morbius said it himself that Solon says he's doing all this for Morbius. And he is. But he wants to be known as the creator of Morbius.
Yeah.
Morbius can have all the power that he wants. But Solon wants the notoriety.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a manipulation of Morbius. I think it's actually we both benefit, what the fuck you're complaining about, type thing. But like the fact that he had this jar thing in a bin for ages, and he was like, "Oh, but I want to put the brain in a head, and reattach the head to a body, and have it all still work." Like, Morbius would have risen to power ages ago.
Yeah,
had Solon not just been obsessed.
Well,
with
even
being perfect.
Even it's like like the side effects of like working on the different bodies. Like when he's stuffed like electrodes into the fucking insectoid heads, and he's like jotting down like stimulus responses and all this type of stuff. It reminded me of so many things, like Dr. Frankenstein, Fabius Bile from the Warhammer universe, just so much stuff. But I was like, I'm just completely blown away by Philip Maddox's performance.
His performance is fantastic. I think the Doctor in the story we said is good. I think Sarah Jane is a good one, but I think this is Philip Maddox's story.
Yeah, no, he is hands down the best thing in this story.
Yeah,
he is so good.
I have a couple of things with Solon as a character. One thing that, like, I kind of get it, and I also kind of don't, is like, okay, we can assume, because he said that like the female's head is not the right size, so Sarah's head is too tiny. To fit the giant brain. Morbius's brain is fucking huge. That wouldn't fit in Tom Baker's head. I don't care what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think Solon was distracted by the curls and didn't realise that like his actual head is smaller. Once he got Kondo, I get that Kondo's head probably wasn't appropriate. Kondo's body, though.
Yeah.
Part of you is kind of like, why didn't you just use Kondo's body and wait for the perfect head to come along? And this is where I think Terrence's original script, where Solon would have been a robot that doesn't perceive human or humanoid beauty and aesthetics, and just sees, lungs that can, filter cyanide
gas.
Just sees a claw for crushing things. Just sees a hand for dexterity. I think in Terrence's original version that makes more sense than someone like Solon, who wants this thing of great beauty, but then creates this hodgepodge. Like, Sarah Jane refers to him as Mr. All Sorts, which is a different character from later in the show. But like, I do sort of wonder why they never mention why he didn't just use Kondo instead. Like, he's there. I will say though, the pure sign that Solon is doing this, A, for personal notoriety, and B, because he's batshit crazy. Dude, as soon as the brain fell on the floor, your experiment was over.
Yeah.
It was on the floor.
There's no 5-second rule.
No. A, you transported it without any of that liquid up 2 flights of stairs. So, I don't know if it's going to hold up very well anyway. You would keep it in that liquid for a reason. Did that reason suddenly go away? But like, dude, it fell from a countertop onto the floor with a bit of a splat.
Yes.
And a thud. We'll say a splud. It's damaged. It's dirty. You've introduced a whole manner of bacteria. Your experiment is over. The fact that he continues is not for Morbius's benefit, because Morbius is now fundamentally dead because he's just a brain that's not connected to anything else. He's not even connected to his fucking vocal cords. He's just a brain. It's all for Solon's own. I need to be able to say ages. At this point.
The operation was a complete success, although Lord Morbius now ends every sentence with the word waffle.
But yeah, I think I completely agree with you. I think, you know, it's called the Brain of Morbius. You know, we have the Sisterhood of Kharn, we have the Doctor of Certain. This is the story of Solon the psycho.
Yeah.
He's Frank. This is a Frankenstein retelling of the highest order, and he is Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And just a reminder, Frankenstein was the doctor.
Yep.
Not the monster.
Nope. Recommend that story to anyone.
I don't think I've ever actually read it. It's one of those stories like everyone knows it, but like I've seen so many sort of interpretations of it. Like, I still think the X-Files post-modern Prometheus is like the best Frankenstein story ever. It's fucking fabulous.
I will lend you the book in return for the novelization of The Brain of Morbius.
Also, we didn't mention in the trivia that obviously this is based on Frankenstein.
Yes.
And the 13th Doctor.
So, here's the thing. The 8th Doctor travels with Mary Shelley for quite a bit of time in the first 5, I want to say, audio stories that Paul McGann did with Big Finish. But the 13th Doctor story, The Haunting of Villa Diodati, takes place on the night that Mary Shelley was inspired to do Frankenstein.
Yeah. But I think it's a really nice connection.
It really is. It really is.
And I forgot to mention it in trivia.
Yeah. So. Read it, people. Read it. So, that is the characters out of the way, and now we're going to come to the final part, the overall section, where Trish and I each give a score out of 5 for the story. Can't remember who went first. Cannot remember who went first the last time. Why no? I did.
I think you went first.
No, I did. I think I did Brain first. I know, not Brain. Pyramids first, and then you did Androids.
And then we went also would be you.
Yeah. So okay. So I go first. Okay. Cool. Yeah, because I'm a massive Pyramids head. So, I honestly forgot how dark this story is. Like, I was watching it again last night, and I was like, because I didn't have to write down my notes as I was watching it. I think I might do that in future. You know, like watch it once with the notes and once without. I actually completely forgot how fucking dark this story is. Like, it's very unsettling at points. Like, this is the most Hammer horror era of Doctor Who is, hands down. Like, the violence, as I said, is thematically apt, but it's a very jarring experience. Like, the blood squib going off, the multiple gunshots to Kondo, like the essentially Morbius snapping his neck with the pincer claw.
Mm.
There's a huge level of violence in this, and like I don't mind it. I'm not one of those people that gets affected by it, but it is jarring, just kind of to say the least, compared to like the last couple of stories that we had. Everything is top quality though in this. It's the story is top quality. The production values are amazing. The music is the constant eerie like violin slash organ music being played over the whole thing is so good. It sets the tone amazingly. Performances all around are great. Philip Maddock is just fucking, he's on a whole other level to everyone else. Like, he is that good in this. Everything's on top form here. Where it kind of falls down though, I think for me, is I suppose in a story titled The Brain of Morbius. And not in a bad way, because like we have Solon there to take up the slack, but Morbius doesn't play as huge a role as you would think that he is in it as such. So like it's still a fantastic story and I still love it to bits. I'm just like, I'm flitting between like a 4.75 and a 5. I really don't know. But I think I'm going to go with a 5. I just like, I really, really enjoy watching the story.
Cool. So that's saving the score from last week or last episode where you gave Android Invasion a 2.5.
Yeah.
And this is now your third 5 out of 5 for the season.
Yeah, because
you had Saigon's, Pyramids, and now this.
I'm sorry, like I love the story of Frankenstein and just everything in this, even like with the little detractors, I still love this story.
Very good. So for me, I agree with everything you said, with one small exception.
Right.
I think there is one area where the production value was not what I would have expected.
Okay.
And that's the Sisterhood.
In what capacity, just out of curiosity?
I think Doctor Who has a cheap budget, and that's fine. The fact that their swords are plastic flames on a stick, I can let go. But the whole idea of the Sisterhood and their chanting, the fact they had a professional dancer brought in, it's hands touching up, repeating sacred fire, sacred flame over and over again, and spinning around in a circle. I just find that a little bit lackluster, just in how they're presented. Even, and like, I know that, like I mentioned, like the dangers of the fire, but like, even before they light the fire, they're dancing around with the, like, clearly they're meant to be dancing with fire, like flaming torches the whole time, but there's no fire on them. They're just dancing with blank torches for a while, or like little tiny flames on them. And I don't know why, it really struck me that like everything else in this is like the way they built the Morbius body, the way they did like the brain jar with the vocal cords, brilliant. The scenery and the sets are fantastic. There was something though, I don't know if it's that the Sisterhood set was too small.
Possibly. I thought like the whole starting off the dance with no flame, I actually thought that was part of the ritual. I thought it was going to build into this crescendo where they do light the torches and then they carry on.
Yeah, I don't. We think like at some point some of the torches are lit and some of them aren't, and you're kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that they could have done more in the production on that, which isn't a story problem. It's a production problem, but it's a production problem that sort of
can take
when
you
you
out
hear
of it.
about the Sisterhood and the power that they have, and the power they get from the flame, and the fact that like they're sacrificing to the flame, all this kind of stuff. It doesn't match with the visual very well, do you know? So that's probably like my biggest sort of that could have been better. everything else I think is fantastic. I completely agree with you. I kind of wish Sarah Jane had done a little bit more in the last episode, other than just being there. Her being there is fabulous, but kind of wish she'd done a bit more than just be there. You know, the bits I didn't like, you know, in terms of like Kondo being creepy, that's his character. That's not, you know, not a negative in any way. So for me, like I really like the story. I always have. But I always sort of consider it in the sort of like terror, planet, pyramids, that we skip Android.
Yeah.
And I never rank it quite as high as the other three. There's bits in it I love, no doubt about it, but I never rank it as high. But so I originally gave this a 4. But as we were talking, and we were talking about Solon and that performance just drives so much.
Yeah.
I can't give him a 4. But personally, I don't believe the story is a 5. So I'm going to 4.5.
Alright, yeah.
Like I said, it was originally a 4, and it was a 4 the whole way through our conversation until we got to Solon, and then I'm like, actually, your man was fucking fantastic.
Oh,
Performance is brilliant.
He's so good.
It makes up for almost everything else. And like I said, I don't like docking points for production value.
Yeah.
But when the production value takes me out of the story, then I don't have a choice.
There are instances where we've always said like, oh, we try not to hold the production values against it, but there are instances where like it goes too far. Like you do like the suspension of disbelief is just completely fucking shot, you know.
Yeah, and like I said, I do wonder if part of the problem was that the set was too small.
Possibly, very possibly.
That room wasn't that big, and that round thing in the middle was quite large. So I do wonder if the set had been bigger and they had more room to move about. Would the dances have been more elaborate? Would it have been more believable? You can actually feel the fact that the dances and the act, like it's the fucking hand shaky action thing. I think if there was more space, I probably would have believed that was actually doing something.
Yeah.
Other than being a bunch of women sat in a circle.
Yeah. No, yeah, like I see what you're saying.
Yeah. But still, 4.5, nothing to snub your nose at.
No.
You know, I'm on 2 5s for the season, not 3.
Yeah.
But I did have a 4.75 and now a 4.5. So we were slightly concerned, like, how would last week impact season 13 as a whole? What I will say is that you are currently resting on a 4.4 for season 13, and I'm resting on a 4.45 for season 13, with an overall average of 4.43. So the question is, next week, we're back into a 6-parter. Seeds of Doom, will it stick the landing?
Here's hoping.
With that, though, we will hopefully, real life work permitting.
Yes.
And my apologies for that. Those of you who listen every week, I really appreciate the fact that you listen every week, but real life got in the way. We will hopefully be back next week with Seeds of Doom.
So, guys, we shall talk to you then.
Bye.
Bye.